A reading from HellWard, Volume 1 of the English Cantos, by James Sale. Canto 8, Neighbor Murderer, lines 62 to 186. The argument. The poet, disgusted with 3 false friends from different stages of his life, now struggles further downwards, where he finds an ex-neighbor of his who murdered his own wife. The relationship with this neighbor is not close as with previous friends, but the proximity of their house is horrifying, as is the nature of the crime. Not just murder, but the depths of the betrayal involved. And for what? Sordid cash from an insurance policy. We descended now a stairwell, polished, smooth to the touch, but touching congealed phlegm, like nacre in its coating. Hard but proof that all that glitters is not pearl or gold. For within this coating the core was wrath, and as I thought of it my blood went cold. Arriving at a corridor just like that alley leading to the underworld, where neighbors we'd known and seen in the light toiled in their way across the cut dividing our properties. The lines defining right. There I recalled that strange and disobliging phenomena. Houses round, posh and neat, and yet each day for some years, rubbish lying, dumped and deliberate, littering the street, put down like defecation in the dark, soiling the living where they meet, for spite. The mess, the filth! Then I came to his ward, and peering in saw Peter there, austere, preoccupied, as hiding what? More fraud? And muffled sounds, stifled, a boot parked there from which some long agony enclosed, hid, sought its redress, release. Too hard to bear to be encased so, bandaged to be rid of, and disposed. What was it he had done? And where was his wife, the woman he'd wed, whom I had seen outside their front garden, pruning such amaranths as live forever, as I supposed, and her, new Eve, its warden? But Peter surely heard us then, but never lifted his eyes to greet new company. Instead, preoccupied in his own fever of counting, slips of paper. One? How many? Who knew but he who reckoned, and for what? If he could tally right, then he'd have plenty? Yet all the while as he just shuffled, sat, the muffling, mixed with a scratching's sound, increased, as if behind some giant rat would not lie down decently dead of wounds. Instead, craved life once more and all its riot. No metal box could stop or keep her bound, and no ignoring too would make her quiet. So what could Peter do, or hope to do? If she would disappear, then he'd inherit 400,000. But how make it so? I saw him then, stopping the devil count, resolving, fists clenched, to have a go. Why not? What lose? If lost in debt, debts mount. And hell, what did he care for her? For life! He said himself, she's just another cunt. The paper slips. The sums made up his wife, now fluttered in the breezeless air, propelled by static rubbed from off his skin, as if blades freed from the soul, dark where they indwelled. Some spilled into the alleyway to loiter, join all the shit he'd made his life, and filled, but most, the others, like magnetic pointers, turned to the boot, as one cut through the lock, revealing whose pain occupied its center. There, her finger stretched, itself in shock, trembling with degrees no earthly nail could, demanding air around him be his dock, and judge according to all that was good. For would not pure air know it? In his hand, his hammer raised to crush her at her root, remove all trace, pulverize to the ground. How he glowed then, a traffic light gone red, bright red, as if beyond money he'd found what he'd always wanted, to kill the dead beyond any chance they'd return or heal. So now as hammer hovered, about to speed, Then Lee let forth her scream, primal and shrill, as one soprano might who shatters glass, despite how hard the glass or set its will to not break down. So now Peter, aghast, involuntarily stupefied, stepped back. And not only him. The vocal blast amazed Dante, who, though paradise prept, inured as it were to all our suffering, suddenly felt again the mortal depths from which heaven itself had been his buffering, till now. And I could not bear the pain, the voice, the broken heart in its offering, thinking obliterated in the strain of hearing her hurt that would never still. Stop, stop, I stammered, rambling and in vain, for I fell, resistless, bereft of will, and more, such was her sound, desire to live. How long suspended in that state of nil, who knows? Only at last there came reprieve, as Dante raised me and her cry was gone. At last, then, my chance to strengthen, revive, but as I mounted, limbs felt like they were stone which I could barely flex or mobilize. I wanted so much to see what was done. My body could not turn. Only my eyes swiveled in their sockets, popping to see this killer who'd married and vowed with lies. For marriage on marriage means bigamy, alongside the murder now on his hands. Had he ever one shred of care for Lee? My neck clicked sharp, as some vertebral strand snapped back into place. So I began thawing with pity even, it seemed, for the damned here before me. Horrors always gnawing deep, deep into being, and their dead souls. Released, I turned now to witness their warring. To find him smoldering like some burnt-out coal, which, even as its surface cools and ashes form, its hot interior still from its central pole continues threshing heat and toxic storms towards her whom he'd sworn to love, protect. And she, freed now from the boot, free to swarm all over him who'd also sold her sex, pimped her at parties, not regarding woman, the divine feminine, its power to hex the male and subtract all that is human. Now she did. Her voice had paralyzed through its high pitch the power of this con man. But now attentive, his heat neutralized, and arched beside his burning ears she perched, not bird-like, but as bees, billion-eyed and buzzing low, so almost scarcely heard, but faintly now what I had not before. The hum was clear, but not for me, her words. Now, there are a lot of great passages in this book, but my reason for choosing this one is very specific, and that reason is it contains my single favorite sentence in contemporary verse. It begins on line 163 with "My neck clicked sharp," and ends on line 186 with "The hum was clear, but not for me, her words." And this sentence really highlights the complex syntax at play in this work. There are a lot of colons, semicolons, dashes, interspersed with enjambment that creates a momentum to the verse, propelling characters towards their doom. As the poet describes it, horrors gnawing their dead souls. And we have this epic simile describing the neighbor's emotional turmoil as smoldering like some burnt-out coal, which, even as its surface cools and ashes form, its hot interior still from its central pole continues threshing heat and toxic storms toward her whom he'd sworn to love, protect. And then we come to his murdered wife, who is perched in a manner not bird-like, but as bees, billion-eyed and buzzing low. So some great alliteration there at the end. And it's just a marvelous sentence. Nobody really writes sentences like this anymore. Everyone is very Hemingway-esque and just kind of banal. And this is just completely the opposite of that. Thank you.